The Icons of Real Estate Podcast. Are you ready to learn the proven money-making secrets from top-producing Icon agents? Ready to skyrocket your business? This podcast is for you. Tune in every week with your host, Tomasz Fonseca, and find out how to implement proven strategies to 10 times your business. From $3 million to $30 million in just 12 months. Brought to you by the Masters in Real Estate Marketing, Arter SEO.
Hello and welcome back to the Icons of Real Estate Podcast. I am your host, Timothy Kaitana, and today, ladies and gentlemen, we have been blessed with another informative episode. So I suggest you get your friends, you get your family, gather around because you do not want to miss this. Ladies and gentlemen, I am joined by a special guest. He has, in his past career, he has shown a resilience, and he has shifted from that into an industry where he is now providing value and knowledge on how you can make the best decisions in your life. Well, who am I talking about? Ladies and gentlemen, help me give a warm welcome to Mr. Axel Meierhoefer. Hey, how are you doing, sir?
I'm good, Timothy. Thank you.
I'm good. I hope I didn't butcher the last name.
No, it's okay.
All right, sir. Welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for being with us. You know, you are a man that I regard as a person who's very knowledgeable when it comes to our real estate market today, whether it's real estate investment or just making good financial decisions. I've been able to look up some of your previous interviews, and you are a fountain of wisdom. But I want to start off from the beginning. I want to get to know how we got here. How did we get here? You know, to those who do not know you, tell us your story. How did you get to where you are today, sir?
Well, it's a very long story, so I try to be concise as much as I can. It started out with basically me being in the German Air Force and being in test flying and having the opportunity to come with my family over to the United States, mainly to California, to get trained by the organizations that build those little black boxes that go into the airplanes before we could integrate them and actually then create checklists and test them and so forth. And these trips that happen a few times a year triggered this idea, isn't there maybe a way to stay longer than just a short period of time, which I ultimately found out there is a program between the German Air Force and the US Air Force where you can literally do an exchange. Mm-hmm. So I applied for it, and there's a little bit of a story, real estate related story about how that went. But ultimately got approved, came over, and the first assignment was in middle to southern New Mexico, I would say. And that was supposed to be for 2 or 3 years. And ultimately, just before that ended, I got asked, hey, we want to do another project, and you're already here. Would you be interested to do that project for us? It was basically 300 miles further south. So we moved there and ended up spending pretty much like 6 years or so with the military in a US Air Force environment when we originally only were supposed to come for 2 years. And then in that last project, I got involved with a lot of stuff that was provided by regular companies. And one of those companies, when I said, hey, I'm about to retire, was saying and offering, hey, if you can come work for us, we will sponsor you for a green card. And that was obviously a nice incentive. So we moved from New Mexico to California to the Santa Barbara area, joined that company and worked there for a little while, 4 years about. And in the meantime, I went to school because everybody said in the US, if you want to make something out of yourself, you need to have a degree. And I didn't. Yeah. So I went to school and went to work in parallel. But then at the company, it became obvious that the way the owner was operating it was not sustainable. And when my fellow executives and I presented an alternative path, which we thought would be a good way for this company to succeed, he basically rejected it. I always call it the mutiny that we had, because when you spend a couple of days and you make a strategic plan and the owner says, no, I don't want to do it, it's kind of disingenuous to think that you can just go back to work and do things where you know they're not right. So within a relatively short period of time, one after the next left, I left too. And the question was, what do you do next? I started a consulting business in 2005, but it also made it pretty clear when you run your own business, you don't have any kind of retirement plans and stuff like that anymore. So I thought, what can we do? And we started looking into investing and ended up investing in real estate because it was relatively shortly after the dot-com bust.
Yeah.
Right. Like some people may remember like cats.com, dogs.com, pets.com and stuff were all businesses that were claiming that they would be billion-dollar companies in the short run, and they all didn't. So the stock market collapsed. And for me, that just meant, okay, stocks doesn't seem to be the right place to go. I need to look at something else. And when you're in the military, you get moved around so often that you have different, sometimes you rent a place, sometimes you buy a place, sometimes you have base housing and stuff, or like the trips to the US that I took, that we stayed in hotels. So we got a lot of experience in what are different ways to live, and that triggered also going into real estate. And that's kind of how it started. And ever since, we have been building our portfolio, and in the last few years have always been encouraged by other people, friends, colleagues, and so forth, to not just talk about it, but make it more in a professional way. Like now you can see in my background, Idea Wealth Grower is the organization that we're having and have created, which helps people how to invest in real estate, how to find the right properties, but then also how to really build a portfolio with the aim of ultimately generating enough passive income to retire.
Wow, that is an amazing story. I am curious because for most people, after the military, it's done. Most people are like, hey, I'm going to retire. I'm not going to do anything. But what inspired and what motivated you to be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to do civilian work. I feel like I still have the fire in me. What was the driving force for you to keep going at that point?
Well, you have to keep it. I mean, even though I was in the Air Force for 22 years and you're accumulating a certain eligibility for a pension, but it's by no means anywhere nearly enough to really sustain yourself. Especially, we still had a relatively small daughter. She was still in school and stuff. So quitting work and saying, okay, I'm just going to live off the relatively small government pension was just not really an option. Right. So we had to, it was basically, it's a matter of an age. I was around 40. But the other thing is, the money was just not enough. So there was no other option than to continue to work. The main thing why real estate ultimately became important, because the goal was to have between the military pension and the passive income out of the real estate enough to at some point be able to say, okay, I'm not dependent on any kind of 401k plans or social security or anything like that.
Yeah. And, that does lead to a question that I have, because on the show, we do aim to motivate and inspire others out there. I know that there are a lot of people that retiring from the military, and they have been in the same position that you were in. And they're at that position with like, you know what? In today's economy, I don't think this is going to be enough for me. I don't think this is going to be enough for my family. I cannot retire off of this. What steps would you advise them to take, if they want to now pursue real estate investment?
Yeah, I think there are three different scenarios one would have to look at. For anybody who is listening to us and is currently in the service and not even anywhere close to retiring or getting out, I would say try everything in your power to take advantage of the VA loan system to get properties. If you think about it, I mean, I didn't know about it. I wasn't necessarily eligible throughout my whole career, but we moved about 8 to 10 times or something like that. If we were smart enough every time to actually get a VA loan and buy a property, and then when we get stationed at the next place, just rent that property. And I know there's a huge mountain of stuff to consider. That's why I always say we basically, with my own experience, created this investment option to work with turnkey providers, and we can talk about what that means. But fundamentally, if you were to do this, or we would have done this, then by the time at the end of my career, we would have had 5, 6, 7 properties already for like different length of period of time, because every time we get repositioned in the military, you can do this. So that's one thing. Then the second scenario is for people that are relatively close to getting out. The important question is, what are you using right now? Do you have a VA finance property? And for anybody who is not aware of that, VA financing basically means you get a mortgage with 0% down payment, which is, regardless of what the interest rate is, that's a super good deal, right? And if somebody is close to retiring, you want to, number one, make sure that at the station that you're at right now, that you get a property if you're not already in one. And then in most cases, and everybody's contract is a little bit different, but one more time after you get out, for wherever you say you want to move, because most people don't stay close to where their last assignment base was. They move somewhere where they either find a job or their family lives or something like that. So you can then get the next property again with VA financing, and you want to keep an eye out, what kind of property under those circumstances would I want to buy? And there is a little bit of, from a rules perspective, the government differentiates between residential real estate and all kinds of other types of real estate. And residential, most people immediately think it's either an apartment or a house. But it also applies to duplex, triplex, and fourplex.
Okay.
So if you are planning in a smart way, and I'm saying this now, I wish I would have known this 25 years ago, right? And then I would have done it better. But for anybody listening to us, if you are in that situation, you're planning to move into your place, location after you get out, then I would highly recommend look at least for a duplex, or if possible, a triplex or a fourplex. And why? Because you can apply, again, 0% financing. And if you just take the example of a triplex or a fourplex, you live in one unit and the other 3 units pay you rent. So you basically have no mortgage payment.
Okay.
Right. So that's a smart way to go. And then when you establish yourself in that location and you say, now I know where I really want to live, and I want to maybe live in a single family home, you can literally rent the 4th unit too after 2 years.
Wow.
Right. So you basically have an investment property with 4 units and no down payment. That's like a beautiful thing to do. As far as, depends a little bit on the service and the circumstances and stuff, but anybody who is VA eligible for financing, you can basically do this every 2 or 3 years. There are some rules, and you might every once in a while have to refinance a property, but there is a little bit to it. And anybody who listens to us and wants to understand a little more details, I would say just get in touch and I can explain it to you. And what you can do and how you can do it and how you can use this beautiful mechanism to your advantage. Then the third category is people who might still have eligibility and not using it right now. Even if you're out of the service for a while and you took advantage in 2021 or so in mortgages at like 2 or 3%, well, you still have your eligibility, so you can consider that for investment properties. Right. So those are a couple of different ways to consider how you can make that transition smoother and get into real estate that can support you. And this scenario, especially the second one, where you go into your new location after leaving the military and immediately look for the right kind of property, it's kind of like a really, really accelerated way that very, very few other people have an opportunity to do.
Wow. Oh, thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, I did tell you that this is going to be one of those episodes that you don't want to miss. And the beauty of it is we're just getting started. But I want to take a quick moment to give a special shout out to the sponsor of today's episode, and that's the Icons of Real Estate Podcast Network. All right. So if you want to get started with your real estate podcast and you just do not know how to do it, then look no further. The Icons of Real Estate Podcast Network got you. All right. We help you bring all your real estate dreams to life through podcasting. Now, if you're wondering how you can do it, our team is ready for you to give us a special call and we'll get you started. My question to you, if you were to get started with your real estate podcast, what would you call it? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you. Now, going back to our conversation, Axel, you've been around through a lot of changes. And, I believe what has placed you in a position to be the go-to for all things investment. People come to you for advice, and that's why we're so honored to have you here and being able to educate our audience. I'm quite curious with some of the changes that we have experienced in the past. The One of the changes that comes to mind was the Great Recession. I'm quite curious, as a person who had made the decision to be like, hey, I'm leaving this job, I'm going to start a company. How did the Great Recession impact you and impact your approach in real estate investing?
Well, the good thing was that I always also have been doing consulting work. And yes, it is true that the economy as a whole took a big hit, but the majority of that hit happened on, in my opinion, financing or mortgages that were given to people who really had no business receiving a mortgage. I know it dragged a lot of other people down. It also impacted a lot of investors. But one of the things that I think is a true thing, like, the older I get, the more I discover these certain sayings, that either your grandpa or your parents or somebody like that, or some guru that you read an impactful book, some of those actually apply. And that one, I would say, during the Great Recession, the one that really applied is, if it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. Right. I mean, people that there's this kind of nasty way of expressing it to say, if you could fog a mirror, you could get a mortgage, and then that's kind of a little bit what happened. And I'm still a little bit shocked that people didn't ask themselves, how is this even feasible and possible? But it's also a good lesson for now and for any time into the future. And not so much the aspect that you should ask yourself, how can I be eligible for a mortgage when I never was before? But the point is more, how can I make sure that for anything that I put my signature, my name and my reputation on a piece of paper, that I actually do everything possible to understand what it really says. And I believe at the time there were, and still this happens sometimes today, where people are asked to sign for something that is an offer that sounds really, really good. And they are so excited about the opportunity that they don't ask the necessary questions. What I mean by that, specifically for the Great Recession or Great Financial Crisis, was that the vast majority of these unbelievable mortgages were basically structured like a balloon. And what that means is you get an amazingly maybe zero interest or almost no interest. You get financing of the house, financing of all the fees, and financing for the move, and financing for your furniture and all kinds of things. So you end up, let's say you want to buy a $200,000 house and your mortgage is $220,000 or $230,000. But balloon means those really, really low payments that you saw that made it even possible for you to sign up and get it approved were only good for the first year, 2 or 3. Right. So one of the things, what I mean by asking questions before you put your name and signature on something, is to say, explain to me exactly how does this work? Right. And fiduciary duties for anybody in financing, that was true before the recession, that has been true during the recession, and ever since after, is if you are, they have to explain it to you. And you know this, Timothy. If you had looked through this huge stack of paper, you would have seen an amortization table. And the amortization table shows for every single payment, for 360 payments, what the number is. And you would have seen after the first 15, 20, 30 payments, it suddenly jumps up to an insane amount. Right? If you had looked, and if you had said, before I sign these 67 signatures on this pile of paper that they put under my nose, I want to understand what I'm signing. I believe the vast majority of these really tragic cases would have never happened. Right. And it goes all the way full circle. And I've been talking about this over and over. It starts already with the fact that we don't really learn in school anything meaningful about how to handle money. Right. And we don't learn very much unless you go into law school and what it means to sign a contract. Right. We don't learn much about the fact that you, as the client or the customer who gets to buy something, have every right to understand every detail. The point I'm trying to make is, don't be content when somebody says, oh, it's pretty complicated, but don't worry. That's not an acceptable answer.
Yeah.
You
And we
should
don't
be,
worry.
if
We just like, hey, yeah, okay. If
yeah,
you
but
say
I
I
mean, what
shouldn't
we
worry,
end
it's
up with,
okay.
well, I am not saying go out and worry. What I'm
Mm,
saying is be aware of what you're signing. People
mm,
sign up for credit cards with 27% interest right now,
yeah,
today.
yeah.
People at the time signed up for 125% financing for 2 years, and then it jumps from like $1,500 that they could afford to $3,500.
Oh,
And the people that sold it to them said, oh, don't worry, in 2 years, your house will be twice as expensive and you can refinance and it's no problem. And on and on and on, right? So again, you need somebody, and that's why part of why I actually started our business is I mentioned to you, and you mentioned it in the intro, it's not just making high performance properties available to our customers.
mm.
It is equally, if not more important, that I, as a mentor, want to educate people so they don't fall into these traps.
And that is true. I do respect your passion to really open the consumer's eyes to some of these things. Now, to those watching this on YouTube, if you're listening to this on Spotify, I'm sorry, but you have an amazing background. It's called the Ideal Wealth Growth System. Now, my question to you is, I know you have a background in education, and how did that influence the creation of the ideal wealth grower system?
Well, one of the things is, and maybe you call that a little sneaky or however you want to put a word to it, but it was important to me that the name itself has meaning.
Yeah.
Right. So I think anybody can understand that the purpose is to get wealth or wealthy. Growing wealth or wealth grower makes sense by the words. And that we want to find an ideal way also makes sense. But there is a little bit of a twist to this, if you give me the opportunity to talk about that for a moment. So ideal is obviously what we all want. We want to grow our wealth and in our money in an ideal way. But ideal is also, besides a word, it's also an acronym. So for us in our system, it stands for, the I stands for the income that you get out of the property. The D is the depreciation. The government literally gives you the opportunity to lower your taxes if you have investment properties. Then the E stands for, as you're holding the property for a long period of time because you want to have it for your passive income retirement, it has equity that grows over time, at least at the rate of inflation. And if we have crazy times like in 2020 and 21, it can go way beyond inflation. So that's another form of money that you're getting in the property. Then you have appreciation. That's the value that is added, right? So equity is when you buy a property, not like with a VA loan for 0 down payment, but let's say for 10 or 20% down payment, those 20% are the equity in the house from day one. When the house grows, a $100,000 house grows 5%, those additional $5,000 that you now have in the house is appreciation of the value of the house. And then the L, the last part, stands for leverage, which means it's obviously, and this is why I always say, anybody can come to me and say, I have an investment opportunity outside of real estate where I can show you it's better than what you do. And I always say, okay, then let's start. And say, okay, you show me who gives you 4/5 of the money you need to do your investment. So if I have a $150,000 house that I have curated for one of our investors, all they have to put in is $30,000. Tell me any other thing that you can invest in where you only need to bring 20% to the table and the rest comes from the bank. Now, even if you find it, then who is going to pay for that loan? And in our case, that's the tenant, not us, right? Now, obviously, there are cases where the tenant changes or the tenant moves out and there might be a month or two when they're not paying, but fundamentally, the mortgage is paid by the tenants, right? But here's the interesting thing. If you have a bank that gives you the $120,000, you put your own $30,000, so now you have a $150,000 house. If that $150,000 house over, let's say, 2 years increases in value by 10%, so $15,000 is now the appreciation in the house. It's not that the bank gets any of it. Even though they gave you 80% of the money, you get all of it. Mm. Now think about this for a moment. You put in 30,000 and in 2 years you made 15,000. That's a 50% return in 2 years just on your own money.
Wow.
And we haven't even talked about any tax benefits or stuff like that. So most of the time, the true outcome of the investment is not very hard to get to about 20%. If you take all the different pieces of idea together. Right. And so when somebody says, okay, that sounds good, but how do I learn the details? Because obviously I just gave you the super high level. That's where Grower comes in, because Grower is the methodology that I'm using for our mentoring. And what that means is the first thing we talk about is the G is, what are your goals? And we start out with what I call the B hack, which is the big, hairy, audacious goal. You want to become a multimillionaire or something like that. And then smaller goals underneath, where we say first property, we want to try to get within the first 6 months of our work together. So goals. Then we look next at, what is your current reality? What are you doing with your money? What investments have you already done? Right? So we can kind of position ourselves. Then the O stands for, what opportunities do you have and what obstacles are in your way? So because obviously we want to overcome the obstacles and take advantage of the opportunities, then the W stands for, what actions are you going to take? It's one thing we can talk, there are plenty of people, you know them, that I have analysis paralysis, but we want to take action. So now we have decided for the next 2 weeks or whenever we have our regular calls, this is the action I take. Then when we meet again, we say, okay, well, what was your experience when you took that action? That's the E, right? And then we say, okay, well, now that we have the experience, does that experience generate any results, which is the last R? And we talk about what the results were. And then we ask ourselves, and this is why this is a cyclical thing. Every meeting that we have, every session that we have, we're going through this again, is now that we have the results of this action that we took, does that impact our goals in some way? Now, it's not going to impact the goal every 2 weeks, but if you say, okay, we wanted as one of our goals to invest in our first property within 6 months, and we go through the whole process, and after 6 months, we own the first property, and in the 7th month, we get the first rent. So that's now a result where we can say, originally, we always put $500 a month aside to build our down payment account, or I call it accumulation account. But now we have $300 extra coming in after everything is paid from this property. So one change is our accumulation account now grows with $800 per month, and we can shorten the time until we can do our next investment. Then we do the cycle again and again and again. So you can see Ideal Wealth Grower has much more meaning than just 3 nice words that kind of say, this is what we want to do.
Now, without taking too much time, I want to find out, how can our listeners that want to become part of this amazing mentoring program, I'll just call it in short the IWG, right? How can they reach out? How can they get started with this? Because I know someone out there is saying, you know what? This is what I was waiting for. I was waiting for someone to really help me make sense of my finances and help me to set goals that are achievable, attainable, and I want to go in that direction. How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, the easiest way is just go to idealwealthgrower.com. And if you stay on the website for about 77 seconds, then it pops up and says, book a call. Or the other alternative is you can write an email to axel@idealwealthgrower.com. And as soon as I get your message and you say, hey, I heard you on the Icons of Real Estate website podcast with Timothy, then we schedule a call, completely complimentary, see what you need, what you want, if we have a good connection with each other. And if I can help you, I'm happy to help you.
Wow, that's amazing. And a little birdie told me you have books. All right. Now, can you please let us know, if we want to learn more, what books can we go and check out, and what apps are available to us to reach out right now?
Well, we have an ebook. So if you get in touch and we have a call and stuff, I give you access to the ebook. If you want to just kind of see a little bit of the content that we're generating, I have 2 suggestions for you. I mentioned the website, but if you put in idealwealthgrower.com/free, we have a mindset manual, because one of the things that we have identified, and I'm sure, Timothy, you have seen this too, it's not just a matter of I want to do something or want to accomplish something, but you have to be in the right frame of mind. And so I wrote a whole book about it, and we have a video series that comes with it, and I'm happy to give this as a gift to your audience. So that's one way. Or for those people who are really, really innovative, it's not that commonly known yet, but we provide a huge amount of content on Substack. So if you just go to substack.com and put in Ideal Wealth Grower, you find our publication. You can subscribe. It's free. And you can see what we're publishing every day.
Wow. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you. If you guys are listening to this and you decide to click off and go back and start scrolling on Instagram or whatever you want to do and not click on this, you have yourself to blame in the next 10 years. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go on that website. All right. The first call you're going to get, Axel, is coming from me. So you're going to be talking to me, even though we had this conversation, because I believe that this is what we need, ladies and gentlemen. We need the opportunity not only to make decisions that are going to better our lives, but the generations to come. And I believe that the IWG will definitely help you do that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is a very sad time because I had so many questions for you, but you know what? I believe that we will do this again. We will definitely have you back on the show and we'll get to learn even more. So that means if you have any questions, write them down in the comments. And then when we have Mr. Axel here again, we're going to address all of the questions that you guys had. Now, sir, do you have any last words for our audience?
Yeah, one thing I want to say, because I've run into this so many times, is number one, don't be afraid to just take advantage of the complimentary call, because that's an action that you can take to really start moving in the right direction. And number two, don't listen to anybody who tries to convince you that it's not for you. You are basically the creator of your own future, and I want to be your guide, holding your hand to get there, whatever you decide it is. And if what you're looking for is not what we're doing, then I have a huge network, Timothy, you're now part of that as well, that I can directly to. But the biggest thing is you have to take action. If you want something to change for the better in your life, you have to take action. So don't hesitate and take the first step.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave you with the 2 words of the day: take action. All right. Share this video with a friend, with a family member, with your social circle, and just at the bottom of the message, just say, take action. I guarantee you, after watching this, those 2 words will have so much more meaning. Sir, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us. You have an amazing story and your knowledge is truly invaluable. I think the program that you have right now is going to change a lot of lives, and I'm happy to say it's going to change the lives of our viewers as well. On the behalf of the Icons team, thank you so much. And if you were listening to this and you got this far, please do yourself a favor. Just click the like and share with a friend. It has been your host, Timothy Kaitana, with the man, the legend, Sir Alex. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can, I want you to just give him a round of applause wherever you are, because this was an amazing episode. Sir, thank you so much. And until we meet again next time, take care.